church family. Thank you for helping our kids in Verse-A-Thon.
All right. Thank you, Karim. Very good. Thank you for saying thank you for Verse-A-Thon. Thank you to everybody who is helping kids earn money for Verse-A-Thon and sponsoring kids to go to AWANA all the way in Africa. So thank you, Karim. He's on spring break, so he's just gonna be playing around the yard while we do our vlog episode. He wanted to say something to everybody, so I thought that was pretty cool. I love it when my kids play in the background and do imaginary games. I had some of the best memories of my life doing imaginary games in the backyard. So that's where he's gonna go. Thank you, Karim. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about in our vlog today it's a little preview from the sermon, or for the sermon this Sunday. There's some things I know people are gonna ask, and I don't think I'm gonna have time to cover it. So I want to give you an idea as to how to go about resolving this question. And that's a question from 2 Samuel 12, which I'm going to be preaching Sunday, March 21st. And the question is, why is God killing a innocent child, that'd be David and Bathsheba's baby, when David is the one who messed up? And how is God justified in doing that? It's troubling because God makes the child sick and the child dies. Spoiler alert if you don't know the story. Well, I've got two ways we can go about resolving this. Number one is that death itself is not always a punishment to the person who's dying, especially not for little ones. There's actually later on, 1 Kings 14, Jeroboam, his wife, King Jeroboam's wife, will go to the prophet on behalf of her sick son. She has a small child who's sick, but her husband had sinned against God and wouldn't even talk to the prophets. And he knew the prophets didn't want to talk to him, so he sent his wife to go talk to the prophet and see if he would pray for his son to be healed. And this is what it says. The response is, because, this is from 1 Kings 14, verse 7, because I exalted you from among the people and made you leader over my people Israel, and tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you, and yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, which is, I'm sure you're floored by, like, what? No, he didn't. But we'll get to this in the sermon. You know what's awesome about the sermon is the grace of God makes it just as if, the justification of God, right, is just as if you never sinned. So God's forgiveness over David does not account his evil against him. So he did only what was right in my eyes, but you have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made for yourselves other gods and metal images, provoking me to anger, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I will bring harm upon the house of Jeroboam, and will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free in Israel, and will burn up the house of Jeroboam, as a man burns up dung until it's gone. Yikes. Anyone belonging to Jeroboam who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone who dies in the open country, the birds of the heavens shall eat, for the Lord has spoken it. Arise, therefore, go to your house. When your feet enter the city, the child shall die. There that is again. God killing a child for the sin of his father. How is he doing that? But listen to what he says. And all Israel shall mourn for him and bury him, for he only of Jeroboam shall come to the grave, because in him there is found something pleasing to the Lord, the God of Israel, in the house of Jeroboam. See what he's saying? I am putting your son to death because he's the only one in your family that I find favor in. Isn't that odd? Ironic, wouldn't you say, that God would kill the one he cares about? See, but to God, to an infinite, eternal, resurrecting God, a child's death is not a punishment. Not to the child. It might be to their parents, but it's not to the child, because now they're in the arms of God. It just doesn't see that way, right? Because so if you go, and even if you go on, there's an adult situation in 2 Chronicles 34. King Josiah leads this big revival after the people had sinned so badly. Josiah brought them back, and in chapter 34, verse 26, after God had pronounced judgment on Judah, he says, "But to the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus you shall say to him, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, regarding the words that you have heard, because your heart was tender and you humbled yourself before God when you heard his words against this place and its inhabitants, and you have humbled yourself before me and have torn your clothes and wept before me, I also have heard you, declared the Lord, because I will gather you to your fathers, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace. And your eyes shall not see all the disaster that I will bring upon this place and its inhabitants." And the next chapter, Josiah dies in battle. He dies shortly after. I mean, it's like, wait, that's a reward? In some cases, death is a reward. So that's answer one. Answer one to this: how is God justified killing an innocent child? Well, to an infinite God, death is not always a punishment. Now, sometimes it is in the Old Testament, and sometimes it isn't. But it's not always a punishment. And number two, sin hurts other people. It just does. You can't pretend like your sin only affects just you. It doesn't. It affects everybody. It especially affects the people you care about. So I just want to give you that word. I didn't think I'd have time to touch on it in the sermon. So I hope that's uplifting to you. I hope that it is helpful. But we're going to continue in this topic as we continue in 2 Samuel, this topic of secret sin.